Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the June 2023 edition of Socialism for All, and it's an audiobook and discussion of Tasks of Revolutionary Army Contingents by Lenin from 1905. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon at patreon.com/socialismforall. There's a link to Patreon in the video description. So a lot of the texts that we do here on the channel are inspired in some way by current events and discourse on social media that happen to be popping up at the time, and then there's a relevant reading that illustrates a point or refutes a point, as in this case. And so, it's these teachable moments that we like to pull out readings for sometimes that we might not do otherwise. In this case, we are reading this piece to illustrate a point about the Black Hundreds. Who were the Black Hundreds? The Black Hundreds were extreme reactionary forces, basically a proto-fascist militia, monarchist, anti-Semitic, just basically everything that the Bolsheviks and other progressive forces within Russia were fighting against. This piece, taken from the revolutionary period from 1905 to 1907, there of course was another later revolutionary period, 1917, which saw two revolutions. Earlier in the year in February, the Tsar was deposed, and then later in the year, the Bolsheviks led the Socialist Revolution. But back here in the First Russian Revolution, 1905, we have a description by Lenin of the tasks of the Revolutionary Army Contingents, and particularly some directives about the Black Hundreds. So we're going to get into the details of that in the context on social media where this came up after the audiobook. Let's now get into the front matter. This piece was written in late October 1905, first published in 1926 in Lenin Miscellany, Volume 5, published according to that manuscript. The source is Lenin Collected Works, Progress Publishers, 1972, Moscow, Volume 9. Translated by the late Abraham Feinberg and Julius Katzer. HTML transcription and markup by R. Simbala, and it can be found at the Lenin Internet Archive within the Marxists Internet Archive. Marxists.org, thanks as usual to MIA for hosting this and thousands of other free Marxist texts in an easy-to-download, simple HTML format. Let's begin. 1. Independent military action. 2. Leadership of the mass. The contingents may be of any strength, beginning with 2 or 3 people. They must arm themselves as best they can: rifles, revolvers, bombs, knives, knuckle dusters, sticks, rags soaked in kerosene for starting fires, ropes or rope ladders, shovels for building barricades, pyroxylin cartridges, which commenting is a type of explosive, barbed wire, nails for use against cavalry, etc., etc. Under no circumstances should they wait for help from other sources. From above, from the outside, they must procure everything themselves. As far as possible, the contingents should consist of people who either live near each other or who meet frequently and regularly at definite hours, preferably people of both categories, for regular meetings may be interrupted by the uprising. They must arrange matters so as to be able to get together at the most critical moments when things may take the most unexpected turns. Therefore, each group must work out beforehand ways and means of joint action, signs in windows, etc., so as to find each other easily. Previously agreed upon calls or whistles so that the comrades recognize one another in a crowd. Previously arranged signals in the event of meetings at night, etc., etc. Any energetic person, with the aid of 2 or 3 comrades, could work out a whole series of such rules and methods, which should be drawn up, learned, and practiced beforehand. It must not be forgotten that the chances are 100 to 1 that events will take us unawares, and that it will be necessary to come together under terribly difficult conditions. Even without arms, the groups can play a most important part: 1. By leading the mass; 2. By attacking, whenever a favorable opportunity presents itself, policemen, stray Cossacks, as was the case in Moscow, etc., and seizing their arms; 3. By rescuing the arrested or injured when there are only a few police about; 4. By getting onto the roofs or upper stories of houses, etc., and showering stones or pouring boiling water on the troops, etc. Given sufficient push, an organized and well-knit combat group constitutes a tremendous force. Under no circumstances should the formation of the group be abandoned or postponed on the plea of lack of arms. As far as possible, members of combat groups should have their duties assigned in advance, leaders or chiefs of groups being sometimes selected in this way. It would be unwise, of course, to play at conferring ranks, but the enormous importance of uniform leadership and rapid and determined action shouldn't be forgotten. Determination and push are 3/4 of success. As soon as the groups are formed, i.e. right now, they must get down to comprehensive work, not only theoretical but most certainly practical work as well. By theoretical work we mean a study of military science, an acquaintance with military problems, the arrangement of lecture meetings on military questions, talks by military men, officers, non-commissioned officers, etc., including also workers who have served in the Army, the reading, discussion, and assimilation of legal pamphlets and newspaper articles on street fighting, etc. Practical work, we repeat, should be started at once. This falls into preparatory work and military operations. The preparatory work includes procuring all kinds of arms and ammunition, securing premises favorably located for street fighting, convenient for fighting from above, for storing bombs and stones, etc., or acids to be poured on the police, etc., also suitable for headquarters, for collecting information, for sheltering fugitives from the police, for use as hospitals, etc. Further, preliminary activity includes the immediate work of reconnaissance and gathering information, obtaining plans of prisons, police stations, ministries, etc., ascertaining the routine in government offices, banks, etc., and learning how they're guarded, endeavoring to establish contacts which could be of use, with employees in police departments, banks, courts, prisons, post and telegraph offices, etc., ascertaining the whereabouts of arsenals, of all the gunsmith shops in the city, etc. There is a great deal of this sort of work to be done, and what's more, it's work in which even those who are quite incapable of engaging in street fighting, even the very weak, women, youngsters, old people, and so on, can be of immense service. Efforts should be made immediately to get into combat groups absolutely all those who want to take part in the uprising, for there is no such person, nor can there be one, who, provided they desire to work, cannot be of immense value, even if they're unarmed and are personally incapable of fighting. Further, Revolutionary Army groups should under no circumstances confine themselves to preparatory work alone, but should begin military action as soon as possible so as to 1. Train their fighting forces, 2. Reconnoiter the enemy's vulnerable spots, 3. Inflict partial defeats on the enemy, 4. Rescue prisoners, the arrested, 5. Procure arms, 6. Obtain funds for the uprising, confiscation of government funds, and so on and so forth. The groups can and should immediately take advantage of every opportunity for active work and must by no means put matters off until a general uprising, because fitness for the uprising cannot be acquired except by training under fire. All extremes, of course, are bad. All that's good and useful, if carried to extremes, may become, and beyond a certain limit is bound to become, bad and injurious. Disorderly, unorganized, and petty terrorist acts may, if carried to extremes, only scatter and squander our forces. That's a fact which, of course, should not be forgotten. On the other hand, under no circumstances should it be forgotten that a slogan calling for an uprising has already been issued, that the uprising has already begun. To launch attacks under favorable circumstances is not only every revolutionary's right, but his plain duty. The killing of spies, policemen, gendarmes, the blowing up of police stations, the liberation of prisoners, the seizure of government funds for the needs of the uprising. Such operations are already being carried out wherever insurrection is rife, in Poland and in the Caucasus, and every detachment of the Revolutionary Army must be ready to start such operations at a moment's notice. Each group should remember that if it allows a favorable opportunity for such an operation to slip by today, it will be guilty of unpardonable inactivity, of passivity, and such an offense is the greatest crime a revolutionary can commit at a time of insurrection, the greatest disgrace that can befall anyone who is striving for liberty in deed and not in word alone. As for the composition of these combat groups, the following may be said. Experience will show how many members are desirable in each group, and how their duties should be distributed. Each group must itself begin to acquire this experience without waiting for instructions from outside. The local revolutionary organization should, of course, be asked to send a revolutionary with military experience to deliver lectures, conduct discussions, and give advice, but if such a person is not available, it's absolutely incumbent upon the group to do this work itself. As regards party divisions, it is natural that members of the same party will prefer to belong to the same group. But there should be no hard and fast rule debarring members of other parties from joining. It is precisely here that we must put into practice the alliance, the working agreement, without any merging of parties, of course, between the socialist proletariat and revolutionary democracy. Whoever wants to fight for liberty, and proves in fact their readiness to do so, may be regarded as a revolutionary democrat, and we must strive to carry on with such people the work of preparing for the uprising, provided, of course, that the given person or group is quite trustworthy. All other, quote, Democrats should be emphatically rejected as quasi-Democrats, as liberal windbags who must not be relied on at all, and whom it would be criminal for a revolutionary to trust. It is, of course, desirable for combat groups to unite their activities. It would be extremely useful to work out the forms and terms of joint action. Under no circumstances, however, should this be carried to the extreme of inventing complex plans and general schemes, or of postponing practical work for the sake of pedantic concoctions, etc. The uprising will inevitably take place under circumstances in which the unorganized elements will outnumber the organized thousands of times over. There will inevitably be cases where it will be necessary to take immediate action right then and there, in twos or even singly, and one must be prepared to act on one's own initiative and at one's own risk. All delays, disputes, procrastination, and indecision spell ruin to the cause of the uprising. Supreme determination, maximum energy, immediate utilization of each suitable moment, immediate stimulation of the revolutionary ardor of the mass, and the direction of this ardor to more vigorous and the most determined action, such as the prime duty of a revolutionary. The fight against the Black Hundreds is an excellent type of military action, which will train the soldiers of the Revolutionary Army, give them their baptism by fire, and at the same time be of tremendous benefit to the revolution. Revolutionary Army groups must at once find out who organizes the Black Hundreds, and where and how they are organized, and then, without confining themselves to propaganda, which is useful but inadequate, they must act with armed force, beat up and kill the members of the Black Hundred gangs, blow up their headquarters, etc., etc. And that's the end of the audiobook. So people often talk about revolution in the abstract, but there's a look from the inside of the 1905 revolutionary period in Russia, and, it's ugly. There's a lot of violence. But again, the point of why we're reading this today was to highlight Lenin's stance vis-a-vis the Black Hundreds. How did he feel about the Black Hundreds? How should Bolsheviks engage with the Black Hundreds? Well, as you heard there at the end, I don't think I need to refresh your memory. Basically, using them as target practice was the suggestion. Now, let's take a look at some discourse that popped up on social media recently, and this is why it's so important to do the reading and also not let people get away with historical illiteracy and opportunism. The former here being used in service of the latter, or at least attempting to use the former in service of the latter. So there's a little bit of backstory here. So for people who don't know, there's this person, Xiang Yu, who I've had a number of clashes with without even really knowing who this person was. But I think literally was like the first person to block me on Twitter a couple of years ago. Anyway, they are kind of frequently in the Patsocs side of things, chummy with Caleb Maupin, that kind of thing, and delivering the kind of reactionary opinions that you would expect from somebody in that circuit. So recently, this person became the subject of some discussion because they seem to be promoting anti-trans messages, let alone, it's Pride Month, but that's never acceptable. Of course, it's going to get a lot of attention this month. So here's a tweet. This is from KPR. It says, "This is what Xiang Yu is doing. This promotion of panic and fear against trans people kills innocent people every day. Anyone who tries to promote this speech is an irresponsible criminal." A little thread. And then they started a thread there about Xiang Yu, and there's various examples of anti-trans messages spreading transphobia. Here's another thread from Natalie Everhart. "Really sucks to have associated my own work so much through nonstop promotion of his activities and platforms over the years, constantly telling you guys to follow and support him as my own base grew, me constantly whining when he'd get banned and then helping his new accounts, etc. But Xiang Yu pretty much decided out of the blue that he can't work with us, quote, wokes and, quote, transgenders anymore, now promotes fucking insane conspiracies against millions of us, including Holocaust denialism, claiming that there wasn't LGBT persecution and that all the Nazis were trans. He's been leaning into claims I've seen by others in his little circles that the evil, quote, trans agenda, TM, that he thinks we are all in on is going to morph you into a, quote, lifetime consumer, and that we're all being taken into this through sissy hypno. We can only guess his browser history. By the way, if you're not familiar with the sissy hypno concept, it is the idea that certain kinds of porn has like hypnotic messages that's going to like make you gay and whatever. Hence the we can only guess his browser history thing. So anyway, it actually goes on for a while here. And maybe not that surprisingly, Eddie from Midwestern Marx popped in to give his thoughts, which were, fuck this, solidarity with Comrade Xiang Yu. So basically the thing here, as a lot of people have been pointing out, I don't watch Midwestern Marx, but a lot of people have been bringing this to my attention because it's become a widespread topic of discussion within the, communist media that is going on online right now, that they seem to be positioning themselves as the next sort of Patsoc e-celeb. The chain runs roughly something like Caleb Maupin to Infracell to Jackson Hinkle. Peter Coffin was sort of a hanger-on there for a while. And now that these people have been cut down and have really no credibility anymore, there's some new space for some new LaRouche to pop up, start promoting reactionary crap in the name of Marxism. And as I was just mentioning on my live stream last week, which I still haven't posted, that'll be posted later in the week, it's not too late, rein it in, issue corrections, apologize. I mean, it could be done. First of all, we don't need any more people trying to push Patsoc crap, okay? We just don't. Second of all, it's just not going to fly anymore. People don't accept this. They accept it less and less. People see through it quicker and quicker. But it seems to me like Midwestern Marx is trying to walk this line of being respectable, but also doing Patsoc stuff. So basically Patsoc stuff, but with some respectability, with, oh, I'm not a LaRouche, how dare you say that? And then just goes on to start talking about degrowth or some other LaRouche buzzword. So anyway, continuing the tweet, I will continue promoting Xiang Yu's revolutionary art, which we need so desperately right now. Xiang Yu is a rapper, unless he abandons Marxism-Leninism. Well, what's it going to take? Anyway, then here's the kicker. Talking to Trump supporters isn't a good enough reason to cancel anyone. So now we're getting into whining about cancel culture and trying to paint this as, oh, he's talking to Trump supporters. No, I don't think that's what's going on here. So trying to stay on the moral high ground and, dot all of his communist I's and cross all his communist T's. But again, it's flimsy as hell. People see right through this shit. It's time to pack it up. I mean, just check the comments. He's getting ratioed on every fucking post he makes like this. It's not going to work for you, dude. Hang it up. So after getting pummeled on this for quite a while, getting ratioed to oblivion by people who actually know what they're talking about, he tweets this. If modern-day Western communists, okay, so like including you, lived in Russia, they would have tweeted pictures of the Bolsheviks reaching out to the Black Hundreds and demanded that people cancel them for it. Well, you've heard some more of the context now. Read a fucking book. It will help you look less like a clown and fewer people will laugh. I mean, on this subject, it's not surprising you got wiped out because Lenin wrote a lot about the Black Hundreds. This is pretty well known. Actually, I'll point you to another piece, Petty Bourgeois Tactics from 1907 by Lenin. Basically, this is a piece where Lenin is expressing frustration with the socialist revolutionaries, the SR party, which is more of a peasant party, petty bourgeois party, populist in orientation. Well, anyway, here's the quote, 2 paragraphs. Long-term and partial coordinated actions. The most constant and coordinated. How empty these words are in the absence of any attempt to explain just what community of interests, of just what classes, lie at the root of all this coordination. We revolutionary social democrats, what Marxists were called at that time, favored joint actions by the party of the proletariat and the parties of the democratic petty bourgeoisie, that is the more progressive peasantry, against the Black Hundreds and against the cadets as the party of treacherous liberalism. The socialist revolutionaries are so far from understanding this class foundation of the Russian Revolution that, on the one hand, they talk about coordination of the socialist and extreme left groups in general. i.e. about concealing the contradictions between the proletarian and the small producer. And on the other hand, they talk about coordinated action by the revolutionary and socialist section of the Duma, the parliament, with the opposition against the Black Hundreds. No, gentlemen, we shall not even discuss permanent agreements or coordinated action in general. You must first agree with us on the policy of fighting both the Black Hundreds and the cadets. Agree indeed. That is our ultimatum. That is our line of policy in the democratic revolution. We shall declare in regard to any question arising in the present revolution, as we declared during the St. Petersburg elections, the proletariat goes unhesitatingly into battle both against the Black Hundreds and against the cadets. As long as the petty bourgeois vacillate, as long as they follow the cadets, this was the bourgeois party, the cadets, unrelenting war against the petty bourgeois. You've abandoned your cadets? You agree to oppose the cadets? If that's actually so, if that is not a mere paper declaration but something you prove in action, then and only then will the Social Democrats fight together with you in democratic action. So, end of quote. I think it's pretty clear here that although the context is a little bit different, Russia at that time was fighting both for its capitalist revolution and then close on its heels, its socialist revolution as well. The Marxists were extremely well organized in Russia and were able to actually overthrow the capitalist provisional government before it really ever got its legs. But the conditions are clear here. You want to fight with the Marxists? Great. You must commit indeed to fighting both the Black Hundreds and the cadets. If you vacillate, what's the outcome? Unrelenting war. So I think we can see here very clearly that the stance was a zero-tolerance policy. So Lenin notes elsewhere that the Black Hundreds were organizing among the more backward sections of the population, and even in some of those sections of the population there was a sort of primitive urge for democracy, which of course the Black Hundreds reactionary propaganda had to work to suppress constantly, and were fairly effective in doing so. That is, when they weren't being driven out by the Bolsheviks and allied forces. So stop with the games, stop with the opportunism, let's wrap it up. We've had this discourse before, we don't need to have it again. And again, as more people do the studies, do the reading, build their class consciousness through both study and experience, the shorter the shelf life on this Patsoc reactionary crap is going to be. And it's really not just channels like me that you're going to be hearing it from. You're going to hear it from every single communist, because they're no longer going to have that ignorance, that liability of ignorance that certain people like to exploit.